Good afternoon, everyone. It is my privilege to be part of this program and share my thoughts on post-harvest management of fruits and vegetables. As we all know, that the basic aim of post-harvest management is to reduce the losses and maintain the quality in the marketable produce of fruits and vegetables. And more or less, it revolves around managing the important aspect of enhancing the shelf life of the produce, maintaining the quality, reducing the metabolic rates, and finally resulting in better shelf life of the produce, which in turn talks about hidden harvest, that the excess produce which was expected to be lost can be brought into the market chain, and that increases the extra availability of the produce for the people. And that is why the post-harvest management of fruits and vegetables becomes a very important part of whole set of supply chain. The principles involves managing the reduction in losses, controlling and managing the downsizing of metabolic rates, controlling the handling part, especially where minimizing bruising, frictional damages, and also talking about to control the pathological disorders and incidence of pests and disease during the storage period. This is one of the classic work that has been done by FAO in 1970s, talking about the center of abundance at the producers or farm gate level. And by the time it reaches to the consumer, it is more pricey and very less in volume. So there are various stages. We talk about the supply chain of the whole part of taking farm level produce from farm gate to consumer in either of the form, either in the fresh form or in the processed form. There are various stakeholders, and at each stage you can see that there are pilferage points which can be related to poor quality, sorting, grading exercises, spoilage, bruising, insect pest incidents, infrastructure challenges, and like that. And this results in adding to the losses that what could have been saved for if right or appropriate technology would have been used for managing these challenges on field or during the supply chain aspect of taking the produce from farm gate to the consumer's plate. So we broadly divide these losses into three broad categories as physical losses, physiological losses, and pathological losses. And there are a couple of specific points on which we can identify it as a nature of loss or the dimensions of losses which go around. Primarily it is the weight of the produce, followed by shrinking and wilting, which again is related to the moisture loss. Weight loss is primarily due to the moisture loss. The color, the enzymatic activities, death of the chlorophyll or unmasking of pigments, changes in texture because concentration of solids present in the fruit or vegetable. Sensory changes, especially in case of taste, which leads to aroma or maybe off odors at the same time if it is towards more senescent stages. Bruising, sprouting, toughening, greening, rotting, these are some other changes which physically help us to identify to our visual sights that the product is either of good condition or in bad condition. And these are broad dimensions which we can relate that how the losses are happening. This is one study which was done in 2021, and report was that if we study that the whole supply chain, for example in case of tomato, there are about 7.3% losses, and of which 6.54% losses have been notified at farm gate level. Similarly, in case of tomatoes, there is about 12.45% of losses, contributing about 9.41 of the whole set of losses, especially at farm gate level. So this becomes the epicenter. At each stage of the supply chain, primarily the origin needs a very specific type of attention to handle the volume of the produce so that such kind of losses could be reduced over the period of time. Apart from this, there are other set of on-farm challenges like pre-post-harvest measures which are not of very good quality, like sometimes the labors are not trained, they are not having mechanical mode of harvesting the produce. They lack on information about variety selection. That is one very important point, that how the product is going to be consumed, who is the stakeholder in terms of utilizing the produce, and farmers generally lack on this particular idea. And apart from this, the intended use of the crop, either table for processing purpose, is one important challenge that associates with the varietal selection, because this is very important that if the channel goes towards processing side and if channel goes towards table utilization, the measures required to keep the longevity of the produce are quite different. I'll share some examples of supply chains in the next slide, which give us how these things are relevant in managing the post-harvest losses. So this gives us as a overall part of supply chain where few stakeholders are clearly depicted, that there is farming unit, there is a food processing and distribution unit, then retail and services, and it reaches to a consumer. That is one of the most traditional setup of post-harvest system, which includes the supply chain and primarily the farm conversion, which adds to the value chain of the produce from farm gate level to the consumer. And this is an example from Rabobank India Finance Limited study, and this model depicts that how many number of stakeholders are involved before the produce reaches from the farmer's point of production to the consumer's point of consumption. And in between, we understand that there are different channels through which it travels. The first is the most traditional one, which is you will be finding in most of the small mandis or retailers' place, because it reaches to some central point through a commission agent. And these are 4 or 5 main stakeholders through which the product passes before it reaches to a place from where it could be marketed in retail. And it is also considered that this particular model is one of the longest in the supply chain of fruits and vegetables. And at each stage we are losing some amount of produce because of mishandling, which may be because of inappropriation of skill of a labor, inappropriation in temperature management, damages in the packaging boxes, incidence of pests, or incidence of some rotting as a pathological impact. And these contribute to the losses. Like each point of handling, there will be some amount of loss. On the other side, if it is like a contract cultivation, and in this contract cultivation term itself is little misguiding in terms of contract part, but if I say that good practices to cultivate a particular crop in association with a forward linkage, which we call as to find or to identify a buyer, and this indicates that farmer knows who will be going to take the crop, or the taker of that particular crop is aware that I will be getting this quality of produce which I can utilize for a specific purpose. And that makes it very interesting that although there is a challenge of monocropping, but itself it is very interesting that prices borne by the organization to enter into such kind of agreements, they are little more profitable to the farmers as compared to open mandi. But there are variations, but this belongs to the shortest portion of the supply chain throughout the various stages of handling. And this also leads to one very important aspect, that it goes for immediate utilization, where the stocking is an important part which reduces the losses. That if you stock it for a very long period, there are chances of pilferage, there are chances of losses. But if it goes for immediate utilization, then a large amount of produce can be retained back and post-harvest losses can be avoided. So there are a couple of other supply chains that are very important to understand, that this channel through which the product is being reaching to the consumer, intended consumer, either for the table purpose or processable purpose, we need to understand that what is the channel through which that it passes through. And again, this particular flow chart also indicates that there are some backward linkages which farmers are doing at their own end to grow the particular crop, and varietal selection or the selection of seed itself is a very important part which plays a very important role in reducing the post-harvest losses. The time of sowing, avoiding the glut in the market, segregation in case of early, mid and late season varieties of this produce. So this helps to decide that at what time the farmer is taking to the produce and to what kind of market. The crop is going to travel how much distance to which particular mode: air travel, road travel, sea travel, or rail travel, freight corridors, export market, in the international domain, national market. So the distance goes for the traveling is very important part. We call this as a food mile. So the backward linkage comes in terms of two very important parts: that what is the selection of the crop for a particular season and what type of seed the farmer is going to produce. Because if there is any challenge between these two, the appropriate crop cannot be grown and final product will not suit to the requirements of the market. And apart from that, once it reaches to the stage of harvesting, it requires the forward linkages, especially towards when we look for the market linkages where the crop will be sold, or the sellers who will be taking the crop or selling it to different units. So there could be a processor, the person in the between, the middleman can be a supplier, a regular supplier of a particular type of crop produced to a processing unit, or it may be handling with the produce that goes to the retail market. So here itself the sorting, grading and trimming exercises also happen, and to some extent the stockist or the retailer also wants that he sells the produce in a better note to the consumer and to fetch better prices. So this is the basic flow chart, and you see that each stage of handling probably will have some pilferage. So again, if this flow chart of handling can be reduced with number of subsets, this will add to the post-harvest volume, especially by reducing the losses. In the next set, this also indicates that this is again the very specific part of the whole supply chain, that after harvesting, how does the produce enters into the market or consumption lines. So this is where four broad categories you can find out: that either there is a fresh local market, there is a processed market, or there is a fresh export market, or a semi-processed market. A few days back we also got one request for training the farmers who probably would like to convert the C grade produce of fruits and vegetables into some value added products. Again, this consumption, like C grade produce, is probably deformed, disliked, leftover produce which have no utilization as in composting or so. Any chance to use it, it is good in state but not microbiologically or pathologically damaged, but it may be not conforming to the marketing norms for which are minimum basic norms laid out either by the market or by any agency, which could be FSSAI, which could be BIS, which could be APIDA, which could be APMC, and that leftover produce is one big volume which needs some attention, rather than just leaving it for grazing animals or maybe using it for composting purpose. So this particular channel right here after harvesting decides the fate, and shorter the consumption pattern or the decision where the crop goes, this helps you to define that how the channel to transport the produce from one location to other location will be decided, and what would be the fate of the product. And sometimes when we are going for the international market, there are limits of tolerances in terms of post-harvest treatments which may be related to fumigation, washing, exposure towards irradiation, UV lights or something. And the reminiscences, if not done in appropriate dosage, the reminiscence may lead to outset rejection of the produce. And there are reports that when the mangoes, especially for Alfonso, which goes to UAE, and grapes which goes to some UK market, mangoes going to London in UK market, the Indian mangoes were banned for 2 to 3 years just because they were not subjected to vapor heat treatment and they were infested by maggots of fruit fly. So rather than taking it to some place or managing it like part utilization somewhere, the SPS measures were very stringent and the whole produce was taken to the furnace, because the market there or the mango production industry in abroad probably are still untouched with the fruit fly infestation. So these kind of things and negligence also adds to such losses, because then the market presence of country becomes questionable, and those who are handling this produce get a bad name. So this loss, such kind of losses are evitable losses which can be, if sincerely seen, can be avoided. Uh, Similarly, if we go ahead again, the pattern for fresh utilization goes into different steps where you are going for grading, sorting, cutting, and trimming, and there are chances you are taking at the produce for farm secondary and primary production through a distribution channel. And at each stage of grading, sorting, cutting, and trimming, there will be some losses. But these losses probably are good because after this, the product is going to have a better shelf life and it could be packaged in a much more better manner. But the trimming losses, if the stage of harvesting is right, probably can be avoided to a larger extent. And if sorting losses, if your machines and equipments are right, your table, sorting tables are with good lighting system, and your labors are with good training, probably the sorting losses can also be controlled at point of time. So these losses across the supply chain makes a very integral part of understanding that if we are vigilant enough, such losses can be avoided by some training and using better machines. Similarly, on this whole side, when we are talking about the produce, we must also be aware that what kind of produce we are handling, because there is a variety of produce, and for each produce, the same set of supply chain requirements may not follow. Because, for example, mango is a soft, pulpy fruit and very prone to compression injuries. On the other side, cauliflowers may withstand some amount of pressure. There are concerns with aging, like stem of asparagus. If its florets are opening, probably, or the buds or tips are opening, probably it will have a very short shelf life. Some of them are very sensitive to ethylene, like banana. Some of them are very sensitive to wilting problems like leafy vegetables, spinach. So what kind of product we are handling and what kind of treatments needs to be done, it's a particular choice that we need to understand before we are handling the main produce. Similarly, tubers like potato, like bulbs like onion, they have a different set of requirements. There is very important problem of sprouting. Even then everything is right, sprouting will take place. And you try to see that the genetic programming of onion, that whenever it is striking the months of October and November, it is programmed to sprout, and despite treatments, despite low temperature, probably it may result in quick successions where sprouting is taking place. And sprouting is one very important part which damages the nutrient composition of the produce and weight of the produce for the commercial concerns. So although sprouting will take place, but at the same time the onion which is intended to be used in a specific manner will not be able to meet out the requirements because of this. Florets opening in case of broccoli and cauliflower. So it is very important to understand what kind of produce we are dealing with, and probably their time temperature combinations, their treatment combinations, their ethylene levels of exposure, and distinction between climacteric and non-climacteric produce should be handled in a very diligent manner. So some of the key pre-harvest recommendations in this whole discussion on the first part of supply chain comes that the understanding of a delicate crop, that fruits and vegetables are perishable soft crop and it needs economy in various operations. So labor at the time of operation must also be chosen wisely and should be trained by far possible. And at the same time, if we are going for understanding the crop, we must have an appropriate idea of varietal selection, whether we are going to use it for fresh purpose or we are going for the processing lines, because that decides the kind of market you are taking in and how far is the market from the catchment area or the center of production. Good practices to be used, small practices to be avoided, and the understanding of the market regulations are very important, that what are the types of market you are addressing, domestic market or international market, closer market or a distant market. In national markets, what is the distance that it needs to travel, what kind of vehicles would be required to travel, what kind of travel corridor you are using, what kind of facilities are there to track the changes happening during the transit. All such kind of technological interventions will definitely support the reduction in post-harvest losses and will support the management of post-harvest losses in perishable supply chain. So some of the harvest recommendations also are in the similar lines, that you harvest it with best of the implements or the equipments. Understand the harvest maturity of the particular crop and harvest it in cool hours of the day when the shock of harvesting or detachment must not impact the metabolic processes of the particular crop. Field sanitation is very important aspect, as you can see here. That leftover crop will definitely be one source for contamination and insects or pathological source or leftover reasons to that damages can be taken up from the soil itself. Like we define it as soil-borne pathogens that can impact, and sometimes soil-borne fungi is also there that stays somewhere in the very untouched corners of the fruit or vegetable. There are challenges like E. coli and sometimes infecting the leafy vegetables by and large, because the quality of water is also not good. This is a cauliflower field, and here you can see there's lot much of leafy waste is being generated as part of it. So these kind of sanitation practices help you to reduce the pest load from the crop and in the field itself, so that you take hygienic side of maintaining the fields. Some of the harvest recommendations also comes in the line that product bruising must be avoided, and appropriate methods to harvest the produce must be followed. Machines or maybe implements which are required can be used in the best possible manner with their relatedness to harvest a particular crop. Then curing is one very important part, and it is done to harden the surface. And underground fruits, underground vegetables, they are very important and prone to this kind of losses because they are covered with soil, and once they are exposed to the outer environment, the thin covering or the thin skin is prone to damage. So it is left for sugarization or hardening in the field. Here you can see there is one unit in the field that is specially dedicated for putting up into the gunny bags, and these gunny bags are left in the field for hardening purpose in the sun. Afterwards, these can also be taken in the shade and allow them to cool for a while and get little more hardened under shady conditions. Maturity indices are very important because this also defines the difference between commercial maturity and physiological maturity. And commercial maturity usually talks about a particular stage of a crop when it is more relevant for utilization. For example, unripe mango, which can be used in pickle industry, and a ripe mango can be used for fresh market, and an overripe mango probably well suited for processing purpose. So this kind of distinction can also help you to regulate the product that goes to the market and for its intended utilization. So this also helps you to go for strategy for market so that glut could be avoided. And in these lines you can see these physical properties, which especially on the basis of size, it is important to see that optimal maturity and immaturity can be seen, that how it goes through for managing the market conditions and taking the produce to the consumer's plate. So in some cases, especially in case of vegetables, immature ones are more preferred over optimal maturity and over mature. Especially in case of peas and beans, that the taste matters a lot. So this kind of market is a completely different type of market and needs handling, where you have immature and optimal maturity. And usually immature beans or immature vegetables are more prone to desiccation, quick loss of moisture, and that results in weight concerns and appearance concerns, and the losses are increased just because of this kind of mismanagement. These are some other things you can go across for understanding the firmness or the hardness of the produce, or the softness using tenderness. And this is one where we are looking after that it goes through various channels. So this particular slide talks about the texture part, understanding the firmness or the tenderness of the produce, and there is a machine that shows you that it is one or the more instrument which gives you a sure value to assess the hardness of the produce. Normally higher values are obtained when the produce is harder, and lower values when the rupturing takes place quickly and it is more towards understanding of softer textures. So this is what the stage of maturity means, that at what particular stage you can decide the market. Say for example, breaker stage could be closer by market, and the mature green stage can be taken up for long distance marketing in case of tomatoes. These are some maturity indices that you can see and can have a idea about that size, color, shape, weight are more important in some case of vegetables and fruits. So key pack house operations also involve sorting, grading, sizing, wrapping in produce, and this particular operation is supportive in removing the unwanted produce or the damaged produce. So this brings more uniformity to the lot, and this pack house operations or unit operations are more supportive in reducing the supply chain in the next stages of handling of the produce. These are some direct packaging options which are available, on-site packaging, and this takes us directly to the concerned center of handling of the produce, and this could be one example where the shortest supply chain or shorter supply chains are more apparently supportive in reducing the post-harvest losses. This is sprouting, and this sprouting can be taken up with certain chemicals like CIPC, low temperatures, ventilated storage, and avoiding the overstuffing of the bags. This kind of scene is very available in some mandis, and this is not from India. I have taken it from the internet, and this particular photograph indicates that there are challenges when the produce is overloaded in a particular vehicle. And these are some other examples to see that how mismanagement happens with the overloading part of it. Say for example, if there are 6 people sitting on the load of a truck which is filled up with fruits and vegetables, if each person is weighing 50 kilograms, so approximately 300 kilograms are there, and what will happen to the lower layers of the produce which is present at the base of the hole. So that will definitely get suffocated and damaged because of overweight conditions. These are some conditions where you will find that if the field conditions are not properly managed or time temperature combinations are not managed, they may have this kind of microbiological or pathological damages, and these kind of rots splitting may happen, and these kind of aerial roots, moisture related roots can come up, which reduces its quality for the marketable purpose. And this is what a complex supply chain looks, which has a mix of backward linkage and the forward linkage, and probably here somewhere is the farmer and the consumer, so it has this kind of channel. I have a simplified slide which shows these kind of channels in a more appropriate manner, where you can see that from here to here it reaches to different angles, and this it looks like. So we have channel number 6, channel number 6, 5 and 4 that talks about these conditions where farmers are more closely associated to the centers of utilization, and this probably gives an opportunity to have better remuneration at the farm gate level, and also it helps that the produce reaches to the destined consumption pattern at the earliest possible, and this will have direct implications on managing the losses. Probably the losses will be less in the shorter supply chains. This was a study which was done in 2018, and this again talks that you cannot avoid losses at different stages, and there are certain crops they have covered like carrots, cabbage and lettuce, and probably at each stage of handling they have assessed that how the losses are happening. Similarly, the supply chain model what works in case of Philippines they have distance managed in terms of number availability of market. So probably when village farms and trading centers are there, they are somewhere between 5 kilometers periphery of the whole 5 kilometers distance from the centers of production, whereas the wholesaler which deals in bulk can go up to 100 kilometers, leading to the second set of wholesalers, retailers and consumers, or to the supermarkets. And these are where the difference between the traditional supply chain and the modern supply chain works across. So these two entities, wet markets and 98-kilometer distance of wet markets, are avoided when the supermarkets come into. But there is one question: how many of the implements would be going to the supermarket? Not everyone. So these cannot be avoided, but these can be managed on the specific basis by segregation of the produce of long-term distance or a short-term distance, or a longer produce traveling time and a shorter produce traveling time. And this helps to segregate the produce, that how it will be reaching to the consumer. So one big study was also done recently, and it was in one of the research journals, talking about various factors. Apart from the supply chain aspect, they are talking about the quality and genetic background manipulation in certain crops, so that the quality is maintained at the genetic level. And through biotechnological applications, we can have certain tools through which the quality can be improved, especially for a particular type of content. Say for example, in case of tomato, we may have a higher tomato with content of vitamin A, and probably a genetic manipulation that it does not release ethylene until and unless it is exposed to ethylene, or identifying certain chemicals like 1-methyl-cyclopropane, which are inhibitors of ripening, and they regulate the metabolic activity at a very low scale, that it stays alive and respires very less. So these are various conditions through which the models are coming up, that apart from the quality management only through extensive supply chain, temperature and packaging management, there are other scientific tools that can be used for reducing the post-harvest losses. This one study is taken up in the Germany, where they were talking about the apples and the impact of ethylene, and probably they came out with a segregation that there is a new set of photoacoustic spectrophotometric mechanism through which they are trying to detect the extent of ethylene generated during the transit period. And specifically this talks about that when the ethylene is generated, probably that leads to certain pressure changes, and that temperature and pressure changes are measured with the help of microphone, and the amplitude rises, and that amplitude is getting recorded. So if there are certain systems such that this amplitude rises, or some signals are there for getting excess of ethylene, and it triggers some other mechanism of scavenging the ethylene in the production unit, or in the transit of that produce, which is inbuilt mechanism in the vehicle itself, will definitely lead to managing the produce for a better shelf life during the transit period and even after, because the exposure of ethylene would be restricted by it. So these kind of technologies which are coming up will definitely be supportive in identifying means to reduce the post-harvest losses. This is one photograph taken from the book Postharvest from Wills, and it talks about that we must understand the temperature requirements of tropical and subtropical fruits and temperate zone fruits, because subtropical fruits and tropical fruits are more prone towards chilling injury. And this also helps us to segregate the temperature-based storage pattern, so as we specifically look forward for identifying what type of produce to be stored in what temperature zone. And sometimes one more important aspect comes, that we also look forward that these results are towards from a foreign country. Probably there may be certain relaxations or certain deviations in temperature requirements from our own native species of fruits and vegetables, which we call as desi species or desi fruits and vegetables. Probably that also can be worked upon, And this requires scientific temperament in terms of research to identify that what is the variation for a particular produce in our conditions as compared to their set of conditions for understanding the temperature requirement for a particular crop. In many cold storages, we have seen that the unripe banana is placed into chilled water, but scientifically it has to be stored somewhere above 13 degrees Celsius. So this type of unawareness or this type of reluctance to address these kind of causes probably adds higher chances of getting the produce lost deliberately while handling and storage. This is one also a good example to see that temperature combinations, finding out which type of product in which they should be stored, especially a kind of when you are going to use for polyfilms. And these polyfilms indicate that the gas and water vapor properties are not appropriately matching. The temperature is also not matching, and that is why it is resulting in condensation. And this condensation is leading to such kind of work. This is work done in our place, and this indicates that if the temperature combination, condensation and excess water and poor aeration is there, these kind of challenges take up the poor quality of the produce in the market, and probably this condition leads to unmarketableness of the produce. This one is a recent study which also talks about the perishable supply chain needs sustainability, and this sustainability comes when the top management of that organization talks about total quality management of the produce, and not only handling of the produce which is of very good quality, but also taking care that the machines that are there for handling the produce are of good quality. And also one more linkage to a backstage, that the people who are handling that particular machine are also very well trained. So this top management talks about that we have supplier quality standards, we have human resource quality standards, information technology and AI to be incorporated more substantially in this quality of supply chain integration from the farm gate to the consumers or the utilization place. And then customer focus should never go away from the chain. And these all set probably comes across to two process parts. One is the process quality and the other one is the logistics quality. And all together comes for the betterment of economic, social and environmental impact. And finally that helps an organization to come up in a more sustainable mode through which the losses can be reduced. So this is what my concern is, that whenever we are talking about post-harvest management of fruits and vegetables, they can never be taken up in isolation. There has to be an incorporation or the integration at starting from the first place, where the farmer's backward integration is very important in terms of identifying the resources to cultivate the crop, and finally and particularly clearly an idea about how the crop they are going to grow will be utilized. So their set of consumers or set of customers or set of variables that leads the end utilization of the produce must be finalized before the crop is sold. So that's all from my side, and I take this couple of recommendations that village level procurement centers near the catchment areas are one good solution, and these are also supported by policy level documents in different ministries, that this helps to make a volume of the produce, and this volume can help any industry to run for a longer period, because instead of everyone to be take up an entrepreneurship exercise, there may be a challenge in maintaining regular input or the availability of raw material to make it run throughout the year. But if many farmers come together and produce a volume, the particular unit at panchayat level or maybe at a primary center level can be a supportive one to give a remunerative result. Definitely it requires good linkages between production and processing, development of rural markets with infrastructure, especially with the storage side and the regular transportation, and also with proper weighing facilities and storing facilities, holding facilities for a while. Then warehousing upgradations, freight corridors, especially through railways, are some important means through which we can achieve a wider and quicker translocation of the produce, transportation of the produce from one location to another, and this could be one added support system for the farmers to reduce their expenses on sending their produce for distant markets. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to interact with such wonderful audience. And at the same time, I extend my heartfelt thanks to the organizer who gave me this opportunity to be part of this program, cold chain program. So thank you very much, everyone.